Support for Connecticut East This Week comes from Arisu Anime, New England's premier anime superstore located in Mystic, Connecticut, with a second location opening May 17th in Fairfield, Connecticut. Visit us at arisuanime, arisuanime.com. Newport Mansions, preserving and presenting 11 historic properties and landscapes, exemplifying 3 centuries of achievements in American architecture, decorative arts, and landscape design spanning the colonial era to the Gilded Age. Tickets and information at newportmansions.org. And SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is offering a $3,500 sign-on bonus for licensed clinicians. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org. It's over for this year. We're talking the 2024 Connecticut legislative session. It was a short session this year, but what does that actually mean? We speak with Eastern Connecticut Senators Cathy Osten and Heather Somers to find out. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. The 2024 Connecticut legislative session ended on May 8th and was a short session this year. But what does that actually mean? And does it make a difference to the work faced by the state's various representatives? Whether you enjoy politics or not, it affects us all, and something we should all try to be more engaged in. This year, of course, is a presidential election year, but it's also an election year for the state's legislative representatives. I caught up with Eastern Connecticut Democratic State Senator Cathy Osten and Republican State Senator Heather Somers to talk about the short session, some of the bills that came out of it, and other topics that made the headlines. I'm guessing you're both still recovering from obviously the short session, because short or long session, it takes a lot out of everybody, doesn't it? Cathy, how do you feel it went?
Well, I always think it's funny when people say short session, long session, because a short session is condensed in time, but it's the same amount of work. And so you're trying to get so much more done in a shorter time. So that's how I feel about short sessions.
Well, I would agree with Senator Osten. It's really an expedited long session. No less bills, no less committee meetings. So yes, we do need a little recovery time.
Tell us, obviously, as always, bills get through, bills die. Let's talk about a couple of the ones that actually, did get through, that survived. Senator Somers, I know that particularly you made comments about the omnibus public health bill. Tell us, the importance of some of what came out of that.
So SB1 is a bill that many of my individual bills were put into. It is a very strong healthcare bill. It has to do with having nurses that are going into homes that may feel they are at risk be able to have an escort if needed. That is something that committee felt very strongly after the tragic death of the nurse in Willimantic. It also includes some additional things, such as making sure we don't have discrimination against someone who has been cared for in a psychiatric way or on a psychiatric medication when they're being discharged from the hospital to long-term care, because that has been a chronic issue which backs up the entire healthcare system. There's coverage for what we call the calcium score test, which is almost like the mammogram for the heart, which can see things that couldn't normally be seen and can prevent life-threatening conditions. Includes a lot of working groups on things like Alzheimer's, loneliness, psychosis, Parkinson's disease. It also cleans up some issues we had with our Connie system as far as HIPAA violations or potential HIPAA violations. There's a lot in that bill. It took the entire session to really get everything in there. That, along with our nursing compact, which allows now Connecticut to join with 44 other states so nurses can get a license to allow them to practice in dual states, are things that are really important for our healthcare delivery here in the state of Connecticut. And so those are some of the highlights of the Public Health Committee. But SB1 was definitely the aircraft carrier bill that had many, many positive bills within it.
A lot of the bills that we do now become aircraft carrier bills to eliminate the amount of time it takes to get a bill through. I tend to like bills that are not the aircraft carrier bills because I think that there's a reason why we did them individually before. But this bill in particular kept to the mission of that bill, and that was relative to healthcare. So I appreciated the bill. I'm not on public health, so I didn't have as much to do with the bill. I did bring up some issues that I was a little bit worried about, and that is the number of people that are incarcerated not being able to be discharged if we were not going to provide them with the resources that they needed relative to mental health care. And they often tend to be the most difficult people that nurses have to take care of. So I was a little bit concerned. We actually have turned our prison system into a quasi mental health facility, a psychiatric institution. Close to 30% of our male inmates are chronically mentally ill, and close to 80% of our female inmates are chronically mentally ill. So I do think that we have to pay attention to the people that we have that are incarcerated to make sure they're providing some of the resources that they need.
It's an interesting comment you make there because, of course, we've been shutting down our correctional facilities here in Connecticut. One would think, therefore, that, okay, the money clearly disappears as well at some point. But I mean, one would think that, having less correctional facilities, that the standard of care could therefore be better.
Approximately $14 million to increase the care, both medical and mental health, in our prison system. They don't have enough staff. They just flat out don't have enough staff medically or in any way for mental health concerns.
Let's turn to Eastern Connecticut in particular. You are both very powerful voices for Eastern Connecticut and obviously your districts. I remember attending an electric boat breakfast earlier this year. Both of you were in attendance there. You both had very powerful things to say. Tax credits for housing and also transportation. Heather, I want to turn to you first because, as I said, both of you made very, very pertinent and powerful statements there. Why tax credits and transportation so important?
Well, I think you heard actually the president of Electric Boat weigh in on that also, saying how important tax credits are for housing in Eastern Connecticut. There are different programs that we have in the state, and unfortunately, Eastern Connecticut has been cut out of those incentives or those tax incentives, which makes it very difficult to find developers who want to create housing here in Eastern Connecticut. And although we did get some funding for Shoreline East, we have to remember that Shoreline East funding has really been decimated by this administration. And you can't have people ride trains when they're not consistent and they're not on time. We were able to have a little bit of funding restored. It's $5 million. We have heard that it is to add a train or two during peak times, but that's not going to solve our transportation problem here in Eastern Connecticut. What we need is consistent, on-time, frequent trains coming to Eastern Connecticut. I had pushed very hard to make sure that happened, and I know Senator Osten did the same. She had a wonderful idea to try to have $10 million added. We really need about $20 million. We ended up with $5 million. I'm still going to push to see if we can use that $5 million to prove to the administration that people will ride Shoreline East, but I would like to see it be used between Memorial Day and Labor Day to help with the offset of tourism that's coming to Eastern Connecticut, increase train service during that time, and then we can prove to people will ride the train. But when you cut trains and you cut service, so you can't get from point A to point B frequently and easily, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I will continue to fight for that, as I know Senator Osten will, but we don't have enough housing and we don't have the kind of transportation that is needed in Eastern Connecticut. And I believe I said on the floor, sometimes this legislature forgets about Eastern Connecticut, but as long as Senator Osten and myself are there, we are not going to allow them to forget.
No, absolutely. And Senator Osten, turning to you, you were very vocal during the session, in particular to Commissioner Eucalito when discussing, obviously, matters about transportation. Why do you feel this part of the state gets ignored?
There's a couple of reasons why this part of the state gets ignored. We tend to be less dense than other parts of the state, so we just don't have the population. When you look at the numbers that Congressman Courtney has, he has a full third of the land mass in the state of Connecticut. Other 2/3 get parsed up by 4 other congressmen and women, and they look on our assets as liabilities. Often, and Shoreline East is a big part of the problem, and my idea was to build it back up. We actually need $30 million to build it back up to pre-pandemic standards, but we lost a lot of the conductors. In order to get them back, we have to build it back up. We also made some room in the Special Transportation Fund. We made $22 million of room in fiscal years. $22 million is left in the Special Transportation Fund, and next year we'll have $60 million by paying down the debt. So we've done a lot of work to pay down the debt in the Special Transportation Fund, which gives us enough enough resources. And they'll say that the liability, that the subsidy that is for Shoreline East is high. Shoreline East subsidy is high, but we subsidize transportation all across the state. We have the largest employers for the number of people that are in there. We have Electric Boat, which is building its workforce back up. We have more than 200 subcontractors to Electric Boat in Eastern Connecticut. Also, when you look at those numbers in the aggregate, that's more hands-on people than any other part of the state. We have the two hospitality industries of Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, which have about 6,000 workers each. That's 12,000 workers. So when you're looking at all of the number of people that we have here, we clearly have the number of people necessary. There are 400 homes being built in Norwich, right near Panema Mills, and another 400 adding on to Panema Mills. That's 800 homes. And the predominance of the people that are living there are from Electric Boat and from the subbase. In the subbase, we have two more subs that came in that are docked permanently at the subbase. So when you look at the number of people that we have here, we clearly have more hands-on work, not at home, but hands-on work that's being done. And when Heather talked about tourism, in Eastern Connecticut, we have the largest tourism venues of any other part of the state. And I think it's why it doesn't get paid attention to as much as other parts. The administration are not willing to put the dollars into Eastern Connecticut. They don't see the return on investment. It's $3 for every $1 that we put in. So if we put in enough to actually work on tourism issues, then we would have $3 for every $1 we put in there. So those are some of the things that Eastern Connecticut has different than other parts of the state. And another reason is a lot of people think that we have to put all of our money into the urban areas, and that's just not true. We really need to pay attention to the rest of the state and not just the urban areas. I'm more than willing to cover the needs in the urban areas, but not at the expense of Eastern Connecticut, and that's what it feels like right now.
Talking of tourism, which is a nice little segue, I wanted to ask Senator Somers about a bill that she and representatives sponsored. It didn't get anywhere this time. It was an act providing grants for tourism public safety from revenue collected from the occupancy and meals tax. Senator Somers, explain to us why you put that forward. Like we said, it didn't get through, but the positives are that a task force has been set up for tourism. Hopefully they'll be able to cover that. But explain why this was important to you.
Well, this is a bill that Representative Howard and I put in, and then others had signed on or co-sponsored it. And it actually went to the Public Safety Committee first, and we knew it was going to be sent to Finance after that. It was to show or to bring attention to the fact that the host town, Stonington in particular, we experience a lot of tourism, but that also requires a lot of police, a lot of wear and tear on our roads and our infrastructure. We're at the point now, because tourism is number one here in Mystic, Connecticut, which spans between Groton and Stonington, also the number 4th place to visit in the United States. And our police force that has to approve events is at the tipping point where they're saying no more events because of the cost that we are experiencing on the local level to pay overtime for police security, to make sure things are safe. It is a large expense for the local municipality. This was an opportunity to bring that to light, to explain to people that are outside of this number one tourist district. It sounds great, but all the money generated from tourism, honestly, is going to the state of Connecticut. And the local municipality is the one that is bearing the burden in many cases for that tourism. So we wanted to make sure that that was shown, which it was shown. And as you said, now we have a task force to take a look at that. And I can give you a really good example. And this is a wonderful event. It's the Mystic Lighted Boat Parade. This year I couldn't attend. I had an event in Old Saybrook. So I'm leaving on 95 going the other way. The cars to get into Mystic were backed up from exit 89 all the way to the Gold Star Bridge on the highway. That's how many people are coming into Mystic. So you can imagine the congestion, the parking, the moving of people around to make sure that people are safe. If you remember, we had a big fire previously at Seaport Marine. All those things are on people's minds. You need a lot of policemen to make sure that that event goes off safely and securely. There's children, there's dogs. Again, that cost is borne by the municipalities. Great tourism event, but not a lot of return for the municipality for being the host of these events.
I want to close out with just a couple more questions for both of you. The unspent ARPA money became a big hot button issue. I don't want to get too deep into this. It's been well reported. Majority of Republicans were not happy about how that was propositioned. It has sort of gone through and is being used to obviously fund certain things. Cathy, I know that, you rebutted a lot of comments that were thrown around about that. It is just one-off money still at the end of the day. I mean, it's what, $360 million. Nobody wants to see that go back to obviously the federal government, clearly. But the things it's going to go towards, what happens once that runs out?
For me, it's always been one-time money. We've used a lot of the one-time money for higher education in particular. I think that we have to really pay attention to higher education. We've made, as part of this last implementer, we've put in what is called the Financial Oversight Committee that is directly targeting higher education to find out exactly how they're spending the dollars so that there is no chance that people can view how it is being spent, recognizing that, quite frankly, we will not have the additional dollars to put in. Right now, it's $160 million with a potential of another $40 million for both higher education systems. Of all of the higher education systems, the one that makes the most sense to me put money towards is our community colleges, because that starts young people and returning students off on a path of higher education. And I think it's the one that we should be funding the most. But we have to remember that this is a problem that we've had across the state. ARPA dollars, the money that went to the schools, you see school after school after school cutting staffing. They use the one-time dollars for staffing, and everybody should have been cognizant of the fact that it was one-time dollars. They should have used it for infrastructure, capital improvements, starting a program that would then fund itself afterwards. These are things that are important. Both Heather and I have some school-based health centers in Ledyard, Groton, and Stonington that are no longer going to get funding, and directly related to this issue, they'll probably close down. Both of us attempted to try to get money into the programs. We were not successful. Again, Eastern Connecticut issue that is not being funded. But I really think that ARPA dollars were not designed as supporting permanent positions. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people used it for.
I personally was very disappointed in the process. This was not a process that went through our appropriations committee, that Senator Osten heads and that I sit on. Our finance chairs and rankings were not included in how these dollars were spent. This really was done behind closed doors between leaders on one side. And they're the ones who decided what as far as the amount of money and ARPA dollars. I agree with you. We want to make sure those dollars don't go to waste because there is a time limit on which those dollars have to be spent. But when we are giving towns hundreds of thousands of dollars for tourism, but we're not giving the number one tourist destination in Connecticut any money for tourism, that becomes an issue for me. When we're spending $400,000 on Little League fields in urban areas, but yet we're not funding our school-based health clinics here in Eastern Connecticut that really just opened. The governor and the administration, they're excited. They're talking about it. They're cutting ribbons. And now we're not funding them. And they're going to close in June when we have waiting lists for behavioral health. We also have military folks that have TRICARE insurance, which is less than satisfactory. That's a whole other story. But their kids get their care at our school-based health clinics. So we don't have the money to fund those, but we're funding these pet projects in mostly the urban areas. If you look at it, churches, not that I don't like Little League, but Little League fields. If you look at the first part of the ARPA spending, to me, it was shameless. It was not taking care of what we should be taking care of and spending money in urban areas. And you can look at the districts that it's going to, but those decisions made by literally 4 people, probably a staff person and leaders deciding where all that ARPA dollars go, given to us the night before saying, do you love it or do you like it? And that's why many of us wanted to protest and say no. We also did not support our nonprofits as we should have. I mean, there's so many things that money was spent on that could have been spent in other ways if we had had a collaborative conversation about how those dollars should be spent. And that was absolutely not the case.
It is obviously a major election year also for all of you. So I just want to give you quick 30 seconds each to say, what are you looking forward to? Why do you want to obviously continue? Senator Osten, I'll just lead off with you.
I, like many of my other colleagues, love the work. and love the fight that comes along with that work, and have found that while Eastern Connecticut does not get its fair shake on issues, without strong people to fight, we would get even less. And so it's something important to me. My district in particular has 4 distressed municipalities, and I fight every day to make sure that they are represented.
Love my district. I love Connecticut. I want to see it be a better place for everyone to be able to live. I feel that we have a very strong bipartisan Eastern District delegation that works well together, that, as Senator Osten has said, if we're not there, we can just see even less coming to Eastern Connecticut. You know, we've all been there. We've done our time, both Senator Osten and I. We are on the Appropriations Committee. We have strong collegiate relationships to be able to get things across the finish line with, obviously, collaboration on both sides. And I think you need that kind of depth and experience to make sure our region is represented strongly and firmly. Neither one of us are afraid to speak up, even when it's not well received at times, but fighting for our districts. I also have distressed communities and towns that need someone with a strong voice, that's dedicated, that can spend the time representing our district. And I hope that I am humbled enough to be reelected to go back.
Well, Senator Cathy Osten, Senator Heather Somers, thank you for everything that you have done so far in the terms that you have been our state senators. We wish you both success, obviously, in your re-election campaigns for later this year. And also thank you both for joining us and explaining to us what happened this year in the 2024 legislative session. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Connecticut East This Week is made possible by Arisu Anime, a Japanese pop culture haven nestled in Mystic and Fairfield, Connecticut, specializing in anime and manga merchandise, featuring an integrated Japanese convenience section designed to mirror Tokyo's vibrant streets. Arisu offers an immersive shopping experience, complete with towering statues and authentic capsule machines. Whether you're a seasoned collector or a curious newcomer, Arisu invites you to explore a world where fantasy and reality merge at Arisu Anime. That's ARISUANIME.com. Newport Mansions, as seen on HBO's The Gilded Age. Newport Mansions preserves and protects 11 historic properties and landscapes in Newport, Rhode Island, exemplifying 3 centuries of achievements in American architecture, decorative arts, and landscape design. Plan your visit this year and attend some of the mansion's signature events, including the Newport Flower Show, June 21st to 23rd, Newport Mansions Wine and Food Festival, September 20 to 22nd, and holidays at the Newport Mansions, November 23rd to January 1st. Tickets and information at newportmansions.org. And
SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, is looking for licensed clinicians and is offering the top benefits packages in the state. Go to licensedclinicians.org to learn more. That's licensedclinicians.org.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. The Connecticut Democratic and Republican parties both held their state conventions recently. The Democrats held theirs at Mohegan Sun and elected U.S. Senator Chris Murphy for a 3rd term as the party's U.S. Senator choice. Murphy was unchallenged for the pick. The party also re-elected its 2 Democratic National Committee members, Marty Carlson and John Olson, and chose 7 presidential electors for November: Dorothy Grady, David Kostek, Tiffany McGuinness, Mike Pohl, Geraldo Reyes, Kevin Sullivan, and Nick Belletto. In her opening remarks, Nancy Donato, the state party chair, called upon the upcoming election one of the most important elections in our lifetimes. Her message was echoed by the rest of the speakers at the event, including Murphy, who said he never takes anything for granted. The Democratic Party convention was also attended by Congressman Joe Courtney, as well as Governor Lamont and Lieutenant Governor Bysewicz. The Connecticut Republican Party held their state convention at Central Connecticut State University and had 4 candidates vying to be the party's choice for U.S. Senator to challenge Chris Murphy. The vote was eventually won by Beacon Falls' first selectman Jerry Smith with 68% of the vote. However, it wasn't enough to avoid the party holding a primary in August this year, something that runner-up candidate Matt Corey, a retired U.S. Navy veteran, said he endorsed and looked forward to, as he felt he was an asset to the party and not a distraction in the party's hopes to beat Murphy. Corey has previously run and lost races for state Senate, Congress, Congress and the US Senate. Smith said during his victory speech he was disappointed he had not reached the 85+1 threshold to avoid a primary race, and said he hoped the party could come to a consensus to avoid an August primary, as he believes it won't help the Republican Party cause. Connecticut groups are working to address the pandemic's aftermath on communities here in the state. Edwin J. Vieira of the Connecticut News Service has more.
Along with connecting residents to vital services, United Way of Connecticut is also helping them deal with mental health challenges. Once the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline adopted the shortened number 988, calls increased. The challenge of answering thousands of calls is being met thanks to the leadership of United Way of Connecticut's president and CEO, Lisa Tepper Bates. She says the pandemic presented pros and cons to what she could accomplish.
It forced us to think in new ways, to learn new ways to work, and at the same time maybe set back some efforts because we just couldn't work on them while we had to address the needs that people had during the height of the pandemic.
Building healthcare connections for residents is what lies ahead. Tepper Bates notes rising costs for basic needs are leading to physical health declines. She says United Way of Connecticut's future work will center around working with healthcare providers to better connect people with support to meet their needs, which can reduce certain healthcare costs. I'm Edwin J. Vieira.
The new London County Farm Bureau is spearheading a campaign to convince the state of Connecticut to look at anaerobic digesters on farms in the state that could be used to turn the thousands of tons of food waste generated each year in Connecticut into energy and provide other benefits for the state's farmers and the environment. Kevin Blacker is a member of the Farm Bureau and said the state has a real waste problem.
Incinerator in Hartford is shut down. Disposing of garbage is becoming very expensive. Removing food waste is a way to reduce that cost. That food waste can then be sent to these on-farm anaerobic digesters where it provides a host of benefits to farms.
Blacker says some of the benefits for farms are they can create their own fertilizer, reducing their overhead costs, as well as charge a tipping fee for waste brought to them to go into a digester, giving them additional income. The digester also creates inexpensive electricity, which the farm can use to heat buildings and dry hay. And excess electricity can be sold to the local grid, benefiting local communities with renewable energy. The food digester at Fort Hill Farms in Thompson is one of the first in the state and is currently generating around 0.5 megawatt of renewable energy, enough to power around 500 homes using a combination of food waste brought to the farm and cow manure created by the farm's dairy herd. Pennsylvania-based AgGrid are the company behind the digester projects, and Rashi Aki, the founder and CEO, admits that although the technology isn't new, its extra benefits of using food and animal waste that would otherwise be shipped out of state or discarded to create electricity and other byproducts makes it more useful than solar and wind power.
What you see here is sort of like a well-integrated system where cows eat their food, they poop, we take their poop, and we take everybody's waste from within 25 to 30 to 40 miles around here. We blend it together. The gas side, we produce methane and energy, but the liquid side, we then apply it onto the lands because we are still capturing all that nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So there is no waste coming out of this facility.
Connecticut no longer buries its waste but ships it out of state at great cost to the taxpayer. We generate around 850,000 tons of waste every year, and it's believed at least 25% of that is food waste that could be redirected to on-farm digesters to produce electricity for local communities. And in the day this week, Bill Krajewski, the custodian at Quaker Hill Elementary School, got the surprise of his life after receiving a frenzied call from the school's principal asking him to get to the school. Krajewski, who has worked in the school system for 30 years, was surprised by the 370 students for finishing in the top 3 of the Custodian of the Year competition run by the cleaning company Cintas. Krajewski received a check for $1,000 and a trip to Las Vegas. Krajewski says he doesn't know how the award will affect him and said he didn't know if he could smile any bigger, but he knows the kids will keep him laughing. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.